Um, oh, yeah, it's being recorded. Okay. We'll wait another minute. I don't know who else. How's everyone doing? Hi, Sharon. Why are you on mute?
I don't know. I always feel like once everybody's off mute, everybody's talking over each other. So it's hello, hello. We're ready for planting.
Awesome.
I just want to eat you up.
Let's go planting, planting.
Gardening quickly becomes an addiction, and before you know it, you have 50 types of seeds and only a square foot to plant in. There's no such thing as too many seeds.
Oh, it's not that way. Yeah. Here. Oh, hey, look at the section. This is true that bad is not. Look at the section. Adrianne, welcome.
Who had a Hamantash for breakfast? Raise your hand.
Who did what with Hamantash?
Who had a Hamantash for breakfast? Raise your hand.
Not only did I have Hamantashen for breakfast, but I'm only here because Yair told me we could plant Hamantashen and grow them for all year round.
Oh boy, now that's exciting.
Only the poppy seed ones.
Don't say poppy. It's Monish insulting.
All right, moon. Okay, I think we can start. Who else is come on? But it's being recorded, and I told people that it's being recorded. So I want to thank everybody for joining this morning. The idea was for the flyer to go out on Bishvat, which it did, with the help of Hoodie and a bunch of people, mostly Hoodie. But I find that gardening is helps with my mental state. It's very relaxing. You don't sit and watch a pot of water boil, and you don't watch a seed necessarily grow day to day, but if you don't go to it after a couple days, you'll see the growth, and it's very, very fun and very cool, especially how the seeds are to what they turn into. So the idea is today we have the Rabbi Farnless from TBDJ, going to talk a little bit about Tu B'Shvat, gardening, and I know that he grows a garden on his balcony. And we have Shmuel from the Kol Tomer Tzion, also and he's going to talk a little bit about gardening as well. And we have, I call myself the rustic gardener, and Oshri is like, yeah, Oshri's Oshri when it comes to gardening. We have a Facebook group, Oshri, myself, and Adrianne for gardening. A little shout out to that. And we find that over the past summer, when we started a Facebook group, that it was very relaxing for people to join in, jump on, ask questions. I know the climate here is very different than in the States. I have a lot of friends in the South who have a longer gardening season. And on top of that, we raised around enough money to plant around 50 trees in Israel. So once today's done, I'm going to send an email off to the shul to make sure that the funds get allocated to we're going to go through the JNF to planted trees in Israel. And we should do this every year because you can't really save seeds. You can't really save a plant from year to year, especially in Montreal. What we offered to people was tomato, bean, pea, kale, and we threw in basil. So everybody got basil. Everybody could sign up for different plants. We threw in basil because it's a fun plant to grow on your windowsill, in front of your kitchen, or wherever. So Oshri's gonna, after the rabbi, after Shmuel, Oshri's gonna get more in depth with actual gardening, and we sent out a pamphlet that Oshri prepared to discuss gardening as well. And after all is said and done, I actually currently have around 12 tomato plants growing in my house that I don't plan on actually planting in my garden. So if anybody wants an actual tomato plant, there's one sitting in front of my camera right now. I started this from seed. It's a Roma tomato. I know Adrianne loves Roma tomatoes. I have around 12 of them growing in my basement right now. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about tomatoes later. But Rabbi, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you, Yair. Thank you to all the organizers. This is such a lovely idea. As Yair mentioned, I joined the group this past spring and summer. I planted up on my upper balcony. I knew that I had so many little critters who were going to be eating all of my handiwork. So I went to my upstairs balcony, and I, like Yair, found it tremendously relaxing just to go out every day and tend to the garden. And this really is so much of a Jewish idea, the concept of seeds, the concepts of planting, the concepts of watching something grow, the concept of patience, that there's no microwave necessarily in Jewish thought. You plant a seed and you wait. The idea is the famous story of the Gemara goes, to plant a seed, even though you yourself might never see the fruits of that labor, but your children and your grandchildren will. So we're planting things that are perennial. So we'll actually, God willing, see the fruits of our labor. But the idea of planting, not just because we are going to see something, but because we are planting for the future, is just really a beautiful, magnificent Jewish idea. And the experience of doing so is what it's about. So Tu B'Shvat, we're obviously more than a month past Tu B'Shvat, but it's most appropriate, because for those who count in Fahrenheit, we hit 36 degrees this morning. So we're above freezing. So that is, we are really moving towards Pesach and springtime. Don't be fooled by all the snow on the ground. It's spring. We're heading towards that. And the idea of planting, of which is, of course, a major part of Pesach as well, the Chai Ka'aviv. So it's really great to be involved in this experience. The idea of the patience, the idea of tending to, the idea of looking towards the future, the idea of growing ourselves, our families, our children. It's really just awesome. You are all here not to listen to me, but to get started with planting. So I'm going to leave it at that and hand it over to the next speaker so that we can so that I can take my jacket off already and get our hands dirty. I'm looking forward. Thank you, Yair, and all the other organizers. Whoever is next, the floor is yours.
Shmuel, take it away.
Hi, I'm Shmuel. So first, a lot of times when I think of plants, I never really thought, where did they come from? Like, where were they born? I don't know what the materials or like the organic things that go into it. And only recently I understood that the tree or any plant is made out of 1%, like the materials, the ground around it, around 6% water, and then 97% carbon that it gets from the air. So plants, trees, fruits, everything that comes with it is basically air. And just these processes, these natural processes, and everything that goes behind, like all the behind the scenes nature is incredible. And learning it, and like when you learn, think about photosynthesis, that's what it means. Taking whatever the nature has to offer and creating these magnificent plants. So that's one thing. But more, I wanted to talk about the school I went to when I was in high school. I went to an agricultural school in Israel called the Mikveh Israel, and this school was founded in 1870. Which back then in Israel was completely a desert. There was nothing in Israel. It was like basically no agriculture at all. There was only 20,000 people living there. So I don't know how many people live in Montreal or Jews in Montreal, but only 20,000 Jews lived in all of Israel, it's like a neighborhood basically. And also they were very like observant, and there was not much like working the lands. And a French Jew named Karl Netter saw this, and he understood soon like people are going to start coming to Israel, and we need something practical. Like we need to start working the lands. So we built this school. He had one student at the beginning, and he taught him how to plant watermelons. And slowly it grew and grew, the school. And eventually in around 1904, when all kinds of pioneers came from Russia and those areas, when they started coming to Israel, so they had people to teach them, thanks to the school I went to. And really you saw that from a desert and from something that like hardly any plants, and in Tel Aviv, everywhere, it was mamash like empty. Slowly everything started becoming green, and you had kakal. I thought that's the, how do you call them, JNF, right? So they in 1901 also started buying the lands and planting tons and tons of trees. And slowly that's how Israel became green. And that brings me to a little portion of Gemara I learned recently in Sanhedrin. So Rabbi Abba says, "En lecha ketz megule vebarur." There's no explicit manifestation of the Geulah. Like there's nothing clearer than when things start becoming green in Israel. Mizeh shene'emar, and where do we learn it? Like that this is the clearest sign. There's a pasuk in Cheskel where God orders the mountains of Israel. He says, "V'atem harei Israel, you the mountains of Israel, anafachem titnu u'perichem tisu," like your branches to grow and you should give fruits. Le'ami Israel, for my land, ki karevu lavo, because they're soon to come. And Rashi says about that, שתיתן ארץ ישראל פרייה בעין יפה, אז יקרב הקץ. Like he basically says that once like Israel starts becoming green and everything starts flourishing, then you'll know it's a sign that we're ready. So I came upon that only after learning about whatever I lived through the agriculture through the years of high school, and after seeing and hiking all over Israel. So that was very exciting for me. And that's it, basically.
Thank you, Shmuel. So now we're gonna get into Oshri's gonna actually start, I guess, like you can call it the workshop. So I sent out a 12-page document last night that Oshri actually put together. Everyone should have received also a little snippet of what plant they received on a sheet of paper. I got these seeds from a company out in Laval, so they're local seeds. Oshri's gonna start talking, and when we got to the planting, I'm gonna so everyone who, just a little heads up, everyone who got tomatoes, who ordered tomatoes, they should have received like a red Dixie cup, with holes in the bottom, as well as a green pot, an extra green pot for the tomatoes as well. The idea that I found very beneficial with growing tomatoes is that when you grow it in a Dixie cup, you can sort of grow the root structure a lot stronger than in a green pot. I actually started growing the tomatoes that I gave over 10 days ago, around 10 days ago, and you can see actually, if you look closely, you can see the 3 seeds. You can see the baby leaves, I guess. There's an actual term for it. Oshri will probably correct me. And then you'll see the true leaf. The true leaf obviously is the one that looks different. Now the idea with planting tomatoes in a Dixie cup is that you can see how low down the plant is from the top of the cup. Now the idea with a tomato is, if you look really closely at this, you can see little hairs on the stem, on the main stem. So the idea with a tomato plant is that once the hairs touch the soil, it will shoot out roots. And obviously more roots is better for the plant. So the idea with a Dixie cup is that once the plant starts to grow taller, you can cut off the leaves. So you don't want leaves touching the soil, but you can add soil to the Dixie cup so the root structure gets even stronger. That's the way that I started growing tomatoes. I don't plan on changing my way of growing tomatoes. And you can see that this cup is already full to the top. This cup is, I have still room to add more soil. And obviously, this is the baby cup. Yes.
Can I interrupt you just to clarify? Once you see that it's sprouting leaves, you pull up some of the bottom leaves and you add more soil?
Yeah, so the idea that I have with tomatoes is that once you have a strong, so I planted 3 tomato seeds in one thing. I think everyone got around 3 tomato seeds. The idea, you can either pull out the ones that don't look so strong inside that cup, or you can let it grow a little bit longer and transplant it into separate cups. So both of these plants that I have here actually had 4 seeds in each cup. And once the plant got tall enough that I was able to separate the plant easily, I planted each one in a separate cup. So instead of having only 1 plant, now I have 4. So literally I planted 3 cups of 4 seeds each. Now I have 12 plants growing in my basement. I didn't necessarily need to keep all of them, but I decided to because I figured I give out tomato plants to people. But this one I'm not going to pull out. I'm not going to do anything with this one yet because it's just too small to touch, to manhandle. I'm going to wait for it to be a little bit bigger, and I'm going to add soil to it. And then I'm going to, my kids are just bringing me random plants from my room. So I'm going to wait for the roots, the structure to be taller, to add soil, and then I'm going to possibly separate these. That's tomatoes. I have a tomato plant. I have around 12 tomato plants that I have no problem. If anybody wants, they can come by and pick it up. They're already growing. They're already well grown, and you can enjoy them. I'm going to give it off to Oshri now. I'm going to go on mute. Oshri's going to take it away.
All right, how's everybody doing today? Let's just hide this. Can everybody see my screen? Yes, hello?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect, okay. So the one thing that I want to express in this workshop is that the soil, the root, the structure of everything is one of the most important things that there is. The soil health itself, right? I want you to get out of this some interesting facts about plants, some interesting facts about soil, what makes healthy soil. Okay, it's not just putting a seed in there and then it'll grow magically. And more importantly, how to take care of your soil as well as some other facts about all the different plants, random facts about the different plants that we have in this particular workshop. So Franklin Roosevelt said, "The nation that destroys its soil destroys itself." And that is incredibly true. If you go and look at any other country in the world that has deforested its forests, that has removed all its trees, its soil is actually dying. Regardless how many nutrients they put in, it doesn't matter. It will eventually fade, right? This is the exact opposite in Israel, where they take care of their soil so well that they revitalize it and it produces more than it was ever destined to. And one thing I don't know if you guys know, there's actually a charter for soil, the World Soil Charter. It's there's a resource in there. It's a couple of 100 pages. You don't have to read the whole thing, but I pulled out one important quote out of this. The overarching goal for all parties is to ensure that soil is managed sustainably and that degraded soils are rehabilitated and restored. Good soil governance requires that actions at all levels, from states and, to the extent that they are able to, other public authorities, international organizations, and in this case of this group, individuals, groups and corporations. That means everybody that has a garden, everybody that has a yard, it's their responsibility to ensure that their soil is healthy. Throwing pesticides to remove bugs, or to keep away animals, or to remove weeds destroys the soil. If you do that, you're not only destroying your soil, you're destroying your neighbors, and this will propagate, and you're poisoning the animals as well. So it is very, very important. A soil with animals, a soil with bugs is a very, very healthy environment. This is what you want. This is where plants will grow. No animals, no bugs, no plants, no fruits, no food. Make sense? So a couple of healthy soil facts. So healthy soil is alive. There are living organisms in that soil. If you hold it in your hands and you smell it, it should smell fresh. Even when you put compost, it should still smell fresh. It shouldn't smell like manure. Healthy soil has bugs. If they can live on the soil, it's good enough for your plants. Yes, we may not want bugs in our indoor gardens, but outdoors, we want that. Those bugs are what will pollinate the plants. No bugs, no pollination. No pollination, no fruits. Very simple, right? It is said that if we lose our bees, we lose 75% of our food. Keep in mind that out of all the plants that are available for consumption by humans, only 30 major plant groups are what we consume. Go to a grocery store, you only see so many plants, right? But there are so many others. But those are the ones that we chose to cultivate. So healthy soil has air freely moving in it. What does that mean? That means that it's not compact, it's not tight, it's not super wet either, which is the next point. Plants breathe from their roots as well. No air invites.
Is that just on my side?
Sorry? Okay.
You crushed for 30 seconds, so go back with 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I have a very, very bad internet connection, it seems. So healthy soil has air freely moving in it. Roots breathe from the soil, right? And nature does that for us through worms, through rocks, through the different root system of different plants. So the root system of a tree opens up the soil for other plants to grow around it and to breathe from it. That's what's important in this case. So when you're growing indoors, as Yair said, you have to have big holes at the bottom for water to drain, for air to drain, for airflow to move forward. Even put holes in on the sides of the pot itself. Some of the best pots out there, yes, plastic with holes, but fabric, where roots can actually grow outside. Okay, and as soon as roots, by the way, touch the air and they're not in soil, they immediately die. And that's a good thing. That's normal. That's a normal process for roots. So healthy soil is moist and not wet. If you see water in your soil, that's a very, very bad thing. That means your soil is not well composed of organic material. It has too much clay in it. And that means that, that plants will spend too much energy growing roots to go and get nutrients instead of growing the plant itself. And if they do that, listen, summer in Montreal is not that long. Maybe if you're in Israel, you're good and you have that chance, but summer in Montreal, not that long. That means your plant's not going to produce as much as you want. Healthy soil does not need to be toiled, right? We see imagery. We see imagery online, and we see farmers toiling the soil and doing all sorts of things. Healthy soil doesn't actually need to be toiled. You plant directly in it. You don't flip it over. You never do that. If you do that, you literally destroy the entire microbial habitat and hurts plant growth. Those microbes are what actually give roots the nutrients they need. No microbes, roots cannot eat. There's a yin and yang in this case, right? Roots depend on these microbes. If they're not there, they're not there, right? A healthy soil also contains different plants. Homogeneous planting invites disease, right? We see, when we drive East End, we drive to New York, whatever, and we see fields and fields and fields of corn. That's a really, really bad thing. Because as soon as you have one disease, that hits corn, it will propagate across the entire crop. We have to do that for food, and they have their ways of dealing with it. But in your garden, if all you do is grow only tomatoes, eventually you will have disease. And eventually, the plants will take all the nutrients from the soil specific for tomatoes or specific for basil, and there won't be enough to continue. You will have to amend the soil with additional nutrients, which is not what you want to do. You don't want to do that. You want the soil to just do it for you. You want bugs to live and die in the soil to feed it. Healthy soil needs to rest. Now, we have Jewish law about this known as Shmita, and it took science a couple of thousand years to kind of confirm that. We knew this for a very, very long time, but yes, healthy soil does need to rest. Thankfully, we have winter, so soil actually does rest quite a bit, but at some point, every few years, I think Shmita is every 7 years, yes, let it rest, just let it be, or plant something completely different, right? So in my case, after 5 years of planting, I decided I'm only planting potatoes and garlic this year, as opposed to any other plant. And soil contains organic material. Organic material is, yes, made of manure, made of dead bugs, made of composted food, and so on and so forth. Though that organic material actually helps store water. Soil with a proper amount of organic material will store 30 times as much water as soil without it. Put water through sand and it goes right through. It barely kind of, it'll absorb a little bit, but it'll go right through and disappear, right? Just like water that's on the beach. It looks wet and then it goes right through. It flows through. And storing this water is very important because it releases water to soil very slowly, the way the roots actually need it. Too much water and nutrients flow away. That's called soil erosion. Flows away, then you've got an unhealthy roots are not going to grow, and they're just going to say, you know what, I'm going to stop right here, and that's it. Is everyone got that so far? Okay. So healthy and fun plant facts, because that's really, really important. Yes, and I already said this part, where plants breathe from their roots. They have to be able to breathe from their roots. Dirty air hurts plants. We all think, oh, well, we have trees that'll breathe carbon monoxide. So, so if I drive in the forest, it'll just clean it up. That's actually not the case. That actually hurts plants. That actually hurts the trees because that's pollution. Carbon monoxide and pollution are two different things, although they're made of the same thing. Plants can sense gravity. I don't know if you guys knew that. They have specific cells in their stem that can sense where gravity is. That's pretty crazy. If you were to plant a plant upside down, if you manage to be able to hold the soil upside down, it will find where up is eventually, right? It will turn itself eventually to do that. Plants can actually see colors. So plants can see blue and red colors. Those are the only colors they can see. That's it. So a blue light, which is most of the day, like right now, it's blue light, tells the plants, it's time for me to grow leaves. I can see the sun, it's time for me to grow leaves. Red light, however, sunrise, sunset, tells the plants, it's time for me to grow flowers. And it only needs, and a plant, in order for it to tell it to start growing leaves or to grow fruit, basically needs a flash of red light. This was proven by Darwin, who did a lot of experiments with blue and red lights and different intensities of red and blue lights. And this is the foundational science behind hydroponics and greenhouses, the light composition. I do hydroponics at home. This is how I grow indoors, right? So I have to measure the kind of light that I give my plants. Plants can have too much light. So inside a plant, there's actual little discs that absorb sunlight and store energy. That energy is then used to convert nutrients to sugars to allow it to actually grow. So if they have too much light, they'll start to close up. If you ask yourself, hey, what kind of plants are these? Well, some plants like basil, for example, they don't like too much light. They like a lot of light, but not too much. Give it 8 hours a day, great. Give it 12 hours a day, they might start closing down, right? So as not to burn them. This is a big problem in greenhouses where the light is more intense than the sun at closer proximity. Plants will trigger reproduction, which is flowers, when in an optimal setting and when stressed in order to propagate their DNA. So what does that mean? When they have enough nutrients, yes, flowers will pop out. That takes a tremendous amount of energy for them to reproduce this way. However, when they're also stressed, they know, uh-oh, I'm about to die. I cannot survive any longer. I must make a flower and I must make a fruit which will take my seed and will continue my genes, right? Plants are living beings. They're alive. We just happen to eat their fruits, right? But they're alive. One trick you can do, for example, with tomatoes is if they're not producing flowers enough, you put your hand in the roots and you shake it. And if you shake it, the plant's going to absolutely freak out. It's not going to know what's going on. It's going to start making a lot of flowers because it thinks that animals are eating at its roots. Now, something actually very interesting. Plants will not make flowers if there's too many nutrients. Why reproduce, man? Life is great. I don't need to make children. I don't need to pass my DNA. I'm going to live forever. I have too many nutrients, which is also a bad thing, right? If you spoil children, they're not going to amount to anything, right? Same basic concept. They're living. So you're going to be growing indoors. I'm assuming you don't want bugs. So how do you water your plants to not have bugs? Well, very simply, you put the planter in a container about 1 or 2 inches high, not too much, right? And you fill up water just to touch the bottom, just enough to touch the bottom. What's going to happen is the soil will act like a sponge. It'll start to absorb water and it'll keep going up and up and up and up and up, all the way to about maybe a few centimeters from the top, and then it'll stop. It will not get wet at the top. The top of the soil should never, ever be wet, not indoors. Outdoors, yes, you're going to sprinkle, that's fine. Or you might have a drip irrigation system that was made famous by companies in Israel and science out of Israel. But the top of your soil should not be wet. If it is wet, the eggs of bugs that are present there, and trust me, they are there, even if you get the cleanest soil, which by the way, doesn't, the eggs will hatch. And if the eggs hatch, they'll start making flies everywhere. And you don't want that. I've had an issue like that. And Yair can probably attest to that, having that issue at some point when starting to grow indoors. You don't want that, okay? Soil will absorb water very, very slowly and prevent overwatering that could suffocate the roots. So the water will go up slowly and the roots will start to drink the water. Now, roots will sense water in the soil and will grow down. More roots means more water being absorbed, means more nutrients being absorbed, means bigger fruit. This is a very, very important idea. The bigger the roots, the bigger the fruits. It's that simple. If at some point your garden is too compact, there are too many plants, they're all going to say, okay, well, I'm not going to grow anymore. I'm good. Depends on the plants. So some plants, for example, are very aggressive. They'll say, I take over. Think mint, right? Moroccan mint. You plant one plant of mint, your entire garden is forever gone. You're going to have just mint everywhere. If you like tea, that's fine, but it's gone. It's going to take over every inch of your garden, and it's going to kill every other plant out there because it's going to take everything from it. It's a very aggressive plant. Alternatively, onion, for example, is very docile. If it even senses one plant next to it, taking its space, it's going to say, no, I'm good. I'm just going to stay small. Leave me alone. Okay. And finally, really, watering your plants from the bottom allows it to provides easier maintenance. You fill up the bottom, you leave, you're good. And that's it, right? You don't need to water from the top, soil will leak out, and so on and so forth. You just water the bottom. When there's no water, you water the bottom again, and that's it. And water will go up to the roots as necessary. So now I wanted to walk you through the growth stages of plants, okay? So when you put a seed in, depending on the seed, right, it may take 14 days, it may take 2 months for it to germinate. It may take 1 day to germinate. It really depends on the seed and on how that particular plant evolved for our environment, right? There are hundreds of varieties of tomatoes for that reason. Different tomatoes in different places have evolved differently. Peruvian potatoes versus European potatoes versus Canadian potatoes are all very different. They've evolved that way. Now, when you put a seed in the soil, the first thing that's going to do is it's going to try and grow a tiny little root, as you see in seed germination. Now, the root is actually not used at all for food or water. What it's actually used for is structure in this particular case. Seeds are so healthy, right? We eat nuts, we eat seeds, and so on and so forth, because everyone says that they're so healthy. The reason why they're so healthy is because they contain all the nutrients required to make life. Think about this for a second. This tiny little seed contains enough nutrients and genetic information to make a plant. That's huge. So at first, the plant doesn't care about any nutrients. Then the seedling pops out. So once it has enough structure to be able to hold itself, it'll pop out 2 tiny little leaves and start the photosynthesis process. And that might go to about an inch and a half, depending on the plant. If you grow corn, like I did a few years ago, your seedling is actually about a foot, right? That's a seedling in corn terms, right? Because the corn will go to about 4 or 5 feet high, sometimes 12 feet, depending on the cultivar. Then it'll go into the vegetative state. So vegetative state is only green. It's not ready for fruits. It will only grow green leaves. Basil, for example, only grow green leaves. As long as, for example, and I'll show you how, you harvest it properly. You don't harvest it, it'll eventually want to reproduce because it reached its height. It'll make a flower. And as soon as basil flowers, it's over. All the flavor is gone. It's not even going to smell like basil anymore. It'll be a new plant later on. So kale, for example, will only be vegetative for a very long time. Eventually, it will make a flower at some point, right? When it makes that flower, you don't want it to make the flower. It's gone. Or you leave it, let it make the flower. The seeds will drop. And next year, you'll have an ecosystem of kale growing, right? Then you've got the bud stage, which means flowers are going to start popping out. This means the roots are pretty deep now. They're able to hold the weight. Then will grow, will be as big as that, right? The bud stage requires a lot of calcium, requires a lot of magnesium in order to actually push out and make a flower. Remember that a flower, see in a lot of blogs online, hey, how do I make the most tomatoes out of my plant? Yeah, remove the first flowers. You see flowers, remove them because it's not ready yet. Because the plant, you want to trick the plant and tell it that and force it to grow more leaves and more roots before flowers. So when you pull out the first flowers, then you'll have even more because those first few flowers will suck all the energy, and the plant will the plant's growth will be smaller, right? We're playing with science in this case. We're forcing it to grow a certain way. Then the flowering stage. Yes, flowers will pop out depending on the plant. You may have enough bugs in your backyard to pollinate that plant. You may have enough wind. But if, for example, all of your neighbors have used pesticides and you don't have any bugs, you don't have any flies, you don't have any of these, guess what? Your plant won't produce any fruit. You'll have to go in there with a little brush and manually pollinate and do what nature's supposed to do for you. That's what I meant by a healthy soil. If it's not growing, well, you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what's wrong? Something's off in my environment. And of course, once it flowers, the ripening is the actual fruit production. So in the case of tomatoes, it'll be a tomato coming out. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more. Does anyone have any questions so far before I continue? No, we're good? Okay. So, growing basil, right? Everybody wants more basil, but basil is hard to grow. It's not just put a seed in and wait. It's very, very difficult to grow because you have to pay attention.
Basil. Everyone should have basil.
Yes,
So
that's right. So you're going to want to plant multiple seeds because not all seeds will germinate because some seeds will have a genetic defect. And it just says, you know what, I'm not growing. There's no point for me to grow. I don't have what it takes to grow, right? So they have a genetic defect. So you want to grow multiple ones, right? Not all super close together. But if you do grow them together in a close proximity, you can just take a tiny little shovel or even a spoon, frankly, a teaspoon, pull them out, dig them out without trying to disturb the roots pretty deep in and plant them elsewhere. And they will transplant. Yes. Did someone say something? No? Okay. So basil requires a lot of sun, 6 to 10 hours per day. Any more than that, you're in trouble, right? It's going to start to close up to protect itself. It's like sunscreen, right? The best time to harvest basil is early in the morning. Why is that? The reason why is because basil will create sunscreen around its leaves. That sunscreen is the smell that you really, really love. That's what makes basil great. It's the sunscreen. It produces an oil, but only in the morning. So you harvest it early in the morning when the sun is nice and bright. You go in and you cut it, but not if it's wet. Never, ever harvest a plant if it is wet. A plant that is cut when it's wet will invite disease. And that's why, and I mentioned it multiple times. If you're going to harvest, clean your tools, clean your hands. Watch with Purell. Everyone's used to Purell. Everyone's got about a gallon at home, I'm sure, at this point, right? Take some Purell, clean your scissors, water, clean it, dry it. Now it's nice and clean. Now you can cut. Because if you cut with disease on it, you're introducing disease into the plant, right? And to build on what Yair said previously with the tomatoes, yes, you pull out certain leaves and then you add soil, but you don't add soil right away. Let the cut dry first before you do that. Because if there's an open wound with dirt invites disease, right? Remember, soil is alive. There are bacteria in there. You will introduce bacteria into it, right? At some point, basil will reach its maximum growth. It's not going to grow any more than that. It's going to want to create a flower. The potency of basil is best when it's young. That's when it tastes really, really, really good. That's when you want to actually use it. And if you're going to cook with it, you only add basil at the end. Otherwise, the oils will evaporate with heat. So you only add it really only at the end of the cooking, not on direct heat. It's a known misconception. Now, if you want a nice bushy plant, right? As you can see, you can see in this slide, there's a little red line. You see, you've got the real show anymore than that. The basil is inviting you to cut it. It's telling you, cut me right here, please. Cutting it right here will force these two little ones to grow into true leaves themselves and will make a stem just like that with two other little ones. And once that's grown, cut it as well. And that's when you harvest it, right? And then you'll have a nice big bushy plant. And if you do that consistently, your basil will produce consistently. Now, at some point, it will stop to be potent. You'll smell it. It'll smell a bit more acidic and less, that sweet basil, that specifically with the Genovese cultivar. It smells sweet. It smells powerful. At some point, it's going to start fading because at some point, that's the lifespan of basil and it's done, right? You pushed it to its maximum. That's it. It's time to pull out the plant or let it flower and just let it drop seeds, and that's it. If you do that at home, you let it flower, the plant will die, and then other seeds will come, other basils will pop out, and the bugs and the microbes in the soil will eat the old plant. It'll take a year, but it'll eat the old plant, and the nutrients in that plant that was present in that plant will go to feed the other ones. And that's how you have a very, very healthy soil. You should not need to add any nutrients, really. You can do that at first, but you should not need to. Does that make sense? Anybody have questions?
Before we go to the next plant, since everyone has basil, let's plant the basil. Let's
All
get
right.
our hands. Let's have the rabbi take off his jacket.
I have a question.
Yes.
We have a lot of seeds here for basil. Should we split it into 2 containers?
So
You could.
So I gave a lot more seeds than they only sold me the seeds in big bulk quantities. So I gave a lot of kale, I gave a lot of basil. And even if you got beans and peas, you don't need as many as I gave out. Tomato, I gave out 3, I think. But you don't need, you really only need 3 or 4 seeds in the basil. And then once you get the hang of it, you can go to the dollar store and buy some containers and plant other basil, if you love basil that much, and plant it. And then once you have a little bit of growth and it's warmer out, you can just plant it straight outside in the ground. But you don't need, even the beans and peas, you don't need, I gave like an average of 5 seeds per bag. You only need 2 or 3 tops. But
Thank you.
no problem.
So little known secret with basil and tomatoes. They're very, very good friends, especially Roma tomatoes. They're very good friends. If you plant basil at the base of a tomato plant, the tomatoes will impart certain properties from basil, and it'll taste a certain way, right? You'll taste some basil in the fruit itself at some point, right? Because they grow well together. Okay. So yeah.
How are these beans different than Holland?
You can put them in jar.
Are they the same thing, or are there special seed versions of beans?
So I mean, we got like sugars, like sweet peas. Those you don't enjoy home. But in theory, the peas that you buy in the freezer at like IGA or whatever, it's the same pea. But those are obviously taken and frozen and cooked down a little bit. These are straight from pods and dried out for planting. Not handled by any of the big box store companies. The bean seeds is the same thing. In theory, if you take a bag of cholent bean mix, and they all came and they all were the same way, in theory, you can take that whole bag, take a handful, plant it in your backyard, and you should have whatever beans you have, red eye, black eye, kidney beans, fava, I don't know, whatever kind of bean is in that cholent mix. In theory, that all those beans it's the same bean. I currently have an orange tree growing in my basement, and I actually took a clementine seed from IGA, and it's actually growing. I don't have any oranges yet, but it's actually growing. And if you smell the leaves actually smell citrusy. And on top of that, just a little side note, at Mark Weinberg's Shloshim, there were whole peppers at the Shalosh Shudas. I took home a whole pepper. Back then, when I went to Shalosh Shudas, I would eat the whole vegetables. I actually took home a bunch of the seeds from the whole pepper and I planted it. And I actually had big green peppers growing from wherever Yaakov bought the pepper from. But it's not, my knowledge, and it's not so vast, but my knowledge in this is that whenever you want to grow something from seed, you want to go to an actual seed store or seed package. You don't want to, it's the pesticides and all that stuff that they put on the vegetables that you buy at IGA or wherever. The chance of that stuff growing into actual proper fruits and vegetables is not as likely. Reno has Mackenzie like galore. I have a lot of seeds. If people want to try out different things, you can always come to my house. Yes, Ronit, we're going to plant right now. Oshri, go ahead.
Okay. So,
Which do you prefer
Yeah.
for our basil?
Yes, Adrianne.
Which do you prefer?
We're going to use the green ones for basil.
Okay. And how much?
I like the green ones for basil. Tomatoes, I like using the red ones.
Okay.
So for the basil, Oshri will explain. We're going to fill it up probably up to the first the lip. You know, that little lip. You're going to see it, and if you're working on like a desk or something, there are holes in the bottom of the pots, so you are going to have soil dripping through a little bit, but you're going to want to fill it up. Now, Oshri, you can.
Actually, I'm going to let you do that because I'm in my
Take it from
mother-in-law's dining room, and there's no way in heck I'm putting soil on this thing. So that's if you guys want to see me next year.
Everyone got a bag. Everyone got a bag of soil. Based on the quantity of pots you got, there's a mixture of seed starting mix, which is very fluffy, and then there's regular garden soil mix. If you have a hand, if you don't mind getting dirty, which is gardening is all about getting dirty and actually feeling the soil. Shmuel has a good angle on his desk right there, or he did. So you're gonna want to take a handful of the soil. I like using my hands. I don't mind the mess. You're gonna want to just fill it up, pretty much fill it up to that lip. I fill it up to the lip. You're gonna want to press it down a little bit. Yeah, someone's using it. Adrianne's using a spoon. Yeah, smart. Doesn't want to get
Here,
dirty.
use one of these.
Yeah, you're gonna want to just fill it up, and then obviously everyone got a little bit more extra soil, extra basil seeds than necessary. I would take, I tried to declumpify the soil before I put it in the bags. You're gonna want to take a couple, I would say 3 or 4 of the actual basil seeds. They're really small, so just you don't want to have them sprinkle everywhere. And you're gonna want to you can take 1 seed at a time and you really just plop it down on top of the soil. I'm gonna put 4 in. I'm gonna put 4, space it out over the top of the soil in the 4 different corners, and then I might put 1 in the middle. So I have the 4 on the side in the corners, and I have 1 in the middle. Obviously, you can't see the actual basil seeds because they're black and they're tiny as you know what. And this is pretty much the same idea for kale. We're not necessarily going to go through each seed because planting kale and planting basil is pretty much the same process. Beans and peas are the same. Tomatoes is very similar. Everything is being planted pretty much the same way. And then what I do is I always sprinkle a handful of little soil after I put the basil in the pot. I take a little handful of soil and I literally just sprinkle it on top. You don't want to bury the seed because the seed also has to be able to feel the heat, feel the moisture, feel the greenhouse effect that that we're all going to create. Now, I a little bit of soil on top, and literally that's it. Literally that's it. You'll feel that the soil is not dry. The soil is moist. I kept it in a tight bag, and I made sure that the soil was a little bit moist when everyone got it. No need to add any water to the soil. But now that you planted it, what I do, so in the email that I wrote, I suggested plastic wrap with like a sharp a pin or something. What I do, I have a whole lighting situation in my basement, but what I personally would do, and this is what works before I got the lighting, is you take plastic wrap, literally plastic wrap that you have in the kitchen, cut out a little piece, cover it on top. I'm going to get my plastic wrap. It's in my other room. Hold on 1 second.
So while Yair is getting that, I'm going to partake with you two pieces of information. So, how deep do you know how to plant the seed itself? Well, the smaller the seed, the higher up in the soil it has to be, right? So basil is barely under the surface, as Yair said. You just put it at the top and sprinkle some soil. Kale is the same thing. Beans, a little bit further down. So you push down to the first indent of your finger, right? Where your finger bends, at the first bend. You make a hole, you push the bean in, and then you cover it. Tomatoes, same thing. Smaller, not as deep, right? Because the size of the initial seed is the size of the initial root. It's very, very simple as that. And before you cover it up, take a moment. I know it's gonna be a weird thing, but take a moment to smell the soil. Just take it and just like sniff it. Like try it. What do you smell? It's not disgusting. It's fresh. It's healthy. It smells clean. That's how soil should always smell like. That's how your garden should always smell like. You take it in your hands, you rub your hands in it, you feel it. That's therapeutic. That's the best therapy you'll ever have, and you don't have to pay $140 an hour for that. You just go in and you play and you get your hands dirty in the soil. That's it. Carry on, Yair.
So I'm not gonna put what I do is I always sprinkle a little bit of water on top of the seeds before I put the plastic wrap, obviously. I put the plastic wrap on. I don't know if everyone can see. Let me just make sure I'm in the front camera. Everyone can see the plastic wrap on the thing. Sometimes I put a rubber band around the top to keep the plastic from moving around. And I literally take a pin or a needle and I literally poke holes in it. And then obviously, if you don't have a grow light, which I would say 99% of people on this call, on this Zoom don't have, you can use a night light. You can use even now that the weather is getting nicer, you can even put it on your windowsill. If you have a windowsill that gets a lot of sun, that should work. It doesn't take that much for the seeds to germinate, but once you have leaves or once you see it popping out, then you're going to want to take off the plastic wrap. Then you're going to want to make sure it gets a lot more sun. Then you're going to want, and obviously you're going to want to keep it watered from the bottom, right? I didn't provide saucers, sorry. Tight budget, we want to plant trees. But that's pretty straightforward with basil, with kale. It's the same concept of the seeds being so small on top of the pot, closer to the plastic, closer to the top, so it gets that sun. And basically what you're creating is you're creating a greenhouse by putting this plastic wrap on top. Different brands, there's the Jiffy pellet brand that you will see in Reno or Home Depot. It's a whole other concept. I'm trying that this year also. But this is straightforward. This is really how they did it back when Shmuel was talking about in the 1800s. This is pretty much how they did it. That's with kale and basil. It's the same quantity of seeds, pretty much. Obviously, more seeds, the fuller the pot. And then obviously when it starts to grow, you can transplant it into bigger pots. You can put it straight into your garden if you have a garden bed in your backyard. If you need help designing or with that obviously Oshri and I are both available to help to some extent. Okay, so that's
we do house calls.
That's kale. I think my bamboo sticks are all around Close St. Luke right now from last year. So that's kale and basil. Now for those who have tomato, I showed a picture of what I do with tomato. You can grow tomato in the pots the same exact way that we just did kale and basil, literally the same exact way. Soil, seed, soil, little water on top, plastic wrap, the whole 9 yards. I personally like the fact that you grow it in a Dixie cup. You literally put soil, not like you see the rims put soil up to that first rim. You see that rim right there? Put the 3 seeds. Now, if you plan on taking the 3 seeds and making 3 separate plants, don't put the seeds so close to each other. But if you plan on pulling out, keeping the strongest plant and pulling out the 2 bad ones, they're not bad, but 2 not so healthy looking ones, plant them apart. Plant them apart in the 3 corners, or plant them a bunch together. But I try to separate them so I'm able to gain all 3 plants. Sprinkle a little soil on top, put the plastic wrap, same thing, soil, whatever. As it grows, you see the baby leaves, the 2 leaves that don't look like tomato leaves, and then you see the true leaves coming out. If anybody wants, I can go bring my plant back. My kids took all my plants back to my my area, and it's the same thing. I poke holes with a drill. If you need more cups like this, I have at home, but you can take even a plastic cup, and it would work also. Now, if anybody has questions about tomatoes, I'm more than happy to answer.
After you put those seeds, first rim, put the seeds in, and then fill up more earth on top of it. Soil.
Yeah, sprinkle a little soil on top of the seeds.
So you still have only about that much in the cup. The rest of
exactly. Because with tomatoes, the whole stem of a tomato plant could grow roots, right? The stronger the root structure, the healthier the plant, the more fruits, the whole 9 yards. The idea with a Dixie cup is you have that much space to add soil, to add root structure.
Okay.
So we're planting February 28th, March 1st. They say in Montreal that the time to transplant outside is end of May. So really we have March, April, we have 3 months of growing tomatoes. Now, I'm going to start some tomatoes today, but I won't start my real tomatoes for my garden for another week or 2. Just because of the timing that we have, because like Oshri said, tomatoes will start to flower. And if it's flowering inside your house, obviously it's flowering, you want to see the fruit of your labor. You want it to produce tomatoes inside. It's cool. I grew tomatoes in the winter and it actually flowered, and I had little baby tomatoes growing in my basement, and it never saw the sunlight, which is really cool. But if you wanted to produce stronger tomatoes when it's transplanted, you're going to want to start pulling those flowers off once you see them. Same thing with cucumbers. If you start growing cucumbers inside, you want to pull the flowers off your cucumber plants. So that's with tomatoes. Beans and peas. Now, the beans that we gave out are bush beans. So they're not necessarily the ones that trellis up a rod or trellis up anything. They're the ones that are bushy beans. Those you can start now. I have a lot more in the house of different varieties if people want to try different varieties. There's a whole thing of seed swapping that people do. I have tons of seeds. I just got a whole crap load of flower seeds. I'm going to try flowers this year also. You can try 2 peas now, 2 bean seeds now, but if you have an area in your garden, or if you're living in an apartment and you don't, obviously, then do them in a pot now, or in these pots, and then you can transplant it into a bigger pot on your porch. You can even put the beans and the peas literally straight into the ground in the end of May. And they will do itself. They will do its own work. Even though it's bush beans, they will do fine. Even though they're snap peas, they will do fine growing up a trellis inside straight to the seed. If you want to start growing seeds indoors, by all means. I have a couple growing. I'm trying to grow soya beans right now in my basement. It's not doing so well, but I'm trying to grow soya beans in my basement. I've tried growing beans and peas in my basement last year. Now, I always found that the plant that I grow indoors is not as good as going straight into the soil. Same thing with cucumbers. It's better to grow cucumbers directly into the soil in May. But it's fun to watch it grow. and I gave plenty. So you can do a couple now, you can do the rest straight into your garden. Beans and peas you can grow next to each other. They're friendly. On the little sheet that I gave out, it shows I gave a list of the different seeds or plants that each plant likes or doesn't like. So that's beans and peas. Tomatoes I went through. Kale is the same way as basil. And then I just want to show one thing because it's actually kind of, your kids grow things. This was done either B'nai Akiva or Hebrew Academy, I don't know. This is parsley. My kids grew it from seed. Now, obviously, if you put it by the window, it'll grow fine. I had mine under the light, which is obviously it's growing really nicely and it tastes amazing. But if you notice, there's no holes in the bottom of the cup, right? So the water is not draining. So the only way to water is from the top. And as Oshri said, I tend to have some flies in my basement, little flies. They're not annoying, but they're flies. What I would do in this kind of case, when it's already planted, there's already soil in the bottom, I would take a nail, heat up the nail with like a lighter, and literally make holes in the bottom just so it drains properly. And I have one for both sons. So I'm going to do that later today because if you look, you can't really see it, but there's so much water. I can literally like pour out the water with the amount of excess water that there is inside here. Now another point, we didn't do peppers. I have peppers if people want to try pepper seeds. I have lots of different types of pepper seeds. People can come by and choose pepper seeds. The thing with plants is that they also will grow to the extent of the pot, right? I grew, last year I grew habanero, which is the sweet habanero. I grew it in January, produced hundreds of flowers inside my house, but not one fruit. I asked my non-rustic gardener for some pointers, and he said, literally, you're planting it in too small of a pot for that plant. I transferred it into a bigger pot, and lo and behold, within a year or two, I had peppers growing. I had peppers growing inside my house, and then when I took it outside, it produced over 100 to 150 peppers in the course of the summer. And so these pots that I gave out, the 4-inch pots, they're meant for seedlings. They're meant for this kind of options. Once you start seeing growth, then change it into bigger pots. As far as the water, now you're going to be able to see a little bit of moisture buildup on top from the humidity from the plastic wrap being on top, and the heat from the sun or the heat from the light wherever you're putting it. I tend to water every couple days. You don't want to drown the seed. You don't want to drown the soil. And it's a little harder to, I don't know if Oshri has more of a tip on watering in this stage when you're trying to germinate seeds. Oshri?
Water from the bottom. So what you want to do is, yes, you planted the seed now, and the soil is a little bit moist, so it'll detect moisture and it will grow and try to germinate, right? But if you put just water at the bottom, it'll take as much water as it needs. At some point, the water will just stay because the soil is saturated. That's good, that's fine, and it drains, and there's a cycle there. So just leave it like that as is. Young plants don't need that much water because they don't have that many plants to keep cool and to drink, so they don't need it as much.
And to answer Rachel comment, mental health is extremely important, and obviously I'll do a plug for Rachel and I are co-chairing a mental health this year, our 3rd year. Gardening is very helpful when it comes to mental health and everything, but obviously if you need mental health, there are people out there for you. You're welcome, Rachel.
Sorry, Yair, just to
Yes.
clarify, we don't water the plant itself.
No.
So whatever container.
Yeah, so these pots are meant for what I mean. You're supposed to water from the bottom, especially when it comes to indoors. I in the beginning I would water from the top in my basement, and I would have to buy those little yellow fly traps. If I showed you the amount of flies that I've collected in my basement, my wife would like be really upset. But if you water from the bottom, the water is going up, and even like I was actually talking to someone, and Oshri actually saw it. I showed him a picture. You'll like once you start seeing growth, you might see looks like mildew. It looks like mold growing on top of the soil because it's just not getting the water or whatever. That's completely fine. I have eggplant growing right now inside my basement, and it looks like there's mold growing on top of the soil. But if you touch it, it's wet. It's perfectly fine. Keep the mold. Don't take it off. And obviously, when you garden, when you plant stuff outside, depending on the system that you have, a sprinkler system or underground watering system or a drip irrigation or a soaker hose, or there's so many options. I think I've tried them all. And I've come to a conclusion of the way that I do it. But when it comes to seedlings, when it comes to indoors, always water from the bottom. In general, that's a good rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that true also when you planted your orange tree or lemon tree, that you'd also water from the bottom? And do you plant the seeds low down like a tomato plant, or do you fill it to the top?
So to be honest with you, I planted the orange tree 3 years ago. I'll be honest, I don't really remember. I don't really remember how I did it. I'm assuming I planted it. This is my third pot that it's in right now. It's the biggest pot I have. It's obviously difficult to plant fruit trees. You have issues, halachic issues, and last year I planted a cherry tree, or 2 years ago, and we posted a picture of the cherry, and it got a lot of backlash on our Facebook group about bringing in halacha into gardening, which the rabbi answered it amazingly. And now this year I can actually harvest my grapes, which I'm happy. I can actually utilize the grapes that I'm going to grow. I mean, I would assume, Oshri could answer this question. I just started watermelon seed, so we'll see what happens. I would assume it's the same idea as beans and peas, the same depth. You wanted to grow a strong root structure. The rabbi was very successful with growing a watermelon. It was kind of awesome walking past his house and seeing a watermelon hanging off his balcony, which is really cool. Kol kavod. And I would assume it's the same thing. And obviously, you know what, at the end of the day, getting your hands dirty with soil and doing this is fun. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, there's always plants at Reno. Or garden centers. I always try, every year I try planting herbs from seeds. It barely ever works. I end up just going to like Provigo and buying the $1.50 parsley or whatever.
That's funny.
But obviously, I would say 90% of my garden last year was stuff that I planted from seed, which is actually obviously very amazing. And this year, obviously, I'm trying to make it even stronger. The herbs I always have issues with. Basil is not an issue because basil grows really well. I have a rosemary plant in my house right now. I actually this one I bought, but it's 3 years old. I bring it indoors every single winter, and I have it in my house, and it's 3 years old. This rosemary. I had mint. So just to get back to the mint, I know people are logging off or whatever. If you have to go, by all means. My kids are watching Zoom or something on Netflix right now. I had mint growing with my raspberries and blackberries, and it literally overtook the entire bed, and it literally made a mess. I decided to get rid of the mint and get rid of the raspberries because I wasn't successful in that location. I literally spent hours digging out all the roots from the mint because it literally went everywhere. And now I grow mint literally in in a
box.
on my balcony. The amount of mint that comes out of this planter, I have it inside of my house. It's hopefully it'll grow back. If it doesn't grow back, I'll just, I don't know, I'll plant another seed, whatever. Mint's a weed. It's an amazing weed. It's a fun weed. It's a tasteful weed, but you have to be careful when it comes to mint. And as I said, I have 12, I think, tomato plants. If anybody wants, by all means, you can come to my house. I'll give you whatever. I grew tomato plants last year. I gave them out to lots of people. I think they're all Roma tomato. One may be a Perone. And label. Make sure you label your plants. Make sure you label your seedlings. I didn't provide sticks. We used popsicle sticks. I did not label some of my pepper plants, and I plant spicy and non-spicy. So I usually tend to have one of my kids taste the pepper and he tell me if it's spicy. And then he usually tastes the spicy one, pepper. He doesn't learn. He doesn't. He keeps on believing me that I'm trying to poison him. And also they say don't plant spicy peppers and regular peppers together, because then you're going to have bell peppers that are going to be spicy. It will space them out, put things in the middle, put them somewhere else. And obviously, Rabbi planted this past year on his upper deck of his porch. Very little squirrel issue there. Obviously, squirrels, rabbits, groundhogs. If you follow the food group, you can see how many groundhogs I caught this past year. We catch the one by Adrianne. That one was a fat, you know what.
You didn't catch mine.
No, we didn't catch it, but I caught a skunk. But we caught skunk. We caught skunk.
And never a squirrel, and I have a gazumpa family of groundhogs living. If anyone wants to do, aka my
yeah, so I've actually caught like 3 or 4 groundhogs in my backyard. I remove them safely. Yeah.
Yair, sorry, I'm trying to plant my tomato plants, and I want to just ask you. So I put, like you said, the amount of earth, and then the 3 seeds separated, and then I misunderstood. So then I'm supposed to fill it with earth because it needs a lot for the structure.
No. So just sprinkle some earth on top of it.
So,
like you did with the top.
That's the part I
you're just gonna cover a little bit. Yes,
Okay.
Sorry. So let me get my tomato plant. I'll show a little closer up.
I think we all underestimate how, I know the first time our group, we made cooks for the NICU. Yeah. And we went and donated them.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It almost,
So you see how I plant? So I'm trying to find something that I can poke. You see this leaf right here? These are the baby leaves. These are not the true leaves. This right here is a true leaf. So what I'm going to do, as it grows up, you see that it's filled up to here with soil. That's it. As it grows up, the baby leaves are going to grow, and I'm going to actually cut off the baby leaves with a pair of like small little. You can even use scissors you have like in your makeup. I don't know. I have a pair of pliers that.
Can you make a little video of that and post it in the Facebook group when you do that, so we could see how you do it?
Yeah, with this one I'll do. Yeah. So this one I'll do.
Thank you.
And then I'll add soil. I'll add soil to it. And then once I get to the top with soil, then I know that literally the whole cup is going to be full of roots. So it's going to be, and then you have different ways of planting it. You can even plant it. I've seen people literally they plant the plant sideways with the stem sticking up. So they have the root structure sideways and the stem sticking up, because that will make the roots have more surface space to go around. These might be a little too close to try to separate them all out.
It's very touching.
They might be a little too close to separate into 3 separate plants. I'm gonna try.
Wait,
I
I
don't know.
was touched when they said.
It might
they
work.
did-
It might
they would
work.
Book for a patient that was coming in. And then when the patient died, they would wrap the body in the quilt, put them on a gurney, and they would stroll out.
So just to show one more thing, so I actually took a tomato plant that I had 4 tomato plants growing in 1 cup. Literally 4. I had a basil that I started to grow, and I literally took the stem of the tomato and stuck it next to the basil. Will it work? Who knows? But you know, it's fun. It's fun to play around. This might actually work. This was a dinky little plant, and it's already somewhat growing straight. And I have some basil growing right there. You can see a little basil. I don't think it's the basil that I provided, but it's a different basil. There's all different types. Bushier, there's blue basil or purple basil. I have seeds if anybody wants of those. So I mean, this is like a salad. This is a tomato and basil. All I'm missing is the mozzarella.
Right.
And what I do is I plant my basil with my tomatoes. I also plant. There's tricks if you don't have like a good gate or a structure around your garden. There's different flowers that you can plant with your tomatoes or with your other plants. That will sort of keep away squirrels, or at least it's supposed to. Marigolds, they say marigolds, if you plant them, squirrels don't like the smell of marigolds. Some people put paprika or cayenne pepper on the soil.
Fox urine.
Ew.
Yeah, people do that.
So something very important about that. It's good that you brought that up because I have one slide specifically about that. You think you can control animals from eating your crops, and it's a losing battle. You can try everything. I tried wolf urine. I tried coyote urine. Actually, it's disgusting. Yes, you can buy it from Amazon. I don't know how they harvest this, but
I feel like your commitment is the madrega that we're not, that we're there.
I'm the
I
My
tried forks in the soil to poke them. I tried everything under the sun, and then I realized at some point and I learned that animals in your neighborhood have evolved to eat available food in your neighborhood. So in my neighborhood, they don't eat my tomatoes. They don't touch my tomatoes. I can have pounds of them. They will not touch my tomatoes. But as soon as they see kale, it's over. It's gone, finished. I'll wake up in the morning, I'm like, it's all gone. Everything's gone. I tried corn. Corn grew, but they ate some of it. So it really depends on the animals in your area. Now, something really, really important. Animals have enough food all around your neighborhood. They don't actually need your food. What they don't have is fresh water. And that's the reason why they're eating your crops. They're not hungry. They're thirsty. They have enough grass to eat. They have enough nuts on trees and seeds everywhere. They've got it. They're good. What they actually don't have is water. So if you fill up a small bowl of water every morning and you just put it there, they're going to drink that water. If you have the chance of having a running fountain of fresh water, even better. They're not even going to come close to your garden. It's that they're thirsty. So if you have tomatoes and you're like, hey, why did the squirrels just go in, make a hole in my tomato, and then just not even eat it? Why are they wasting it? All they did is drink the water from the tomato itself. That's something very important.
Yeah.
Lastly, at some point, just give up. Just give up and grow something that they won't eat. So for example, I gave up on growing kale in my neighborhood. Although I have a few neighbors down my street who will actually be able to grow kale successfully. I can't. For the life of me, I can't. So I grow garlic, onions, potatoes. They don't touch any of it, and I can sleep well at night knowing no one is eating my crops, right? So you have to figure out what the animals or what nature around you will want to eat, and just don't grow that. And that's life. Otherwise, invest in a greenhouse or move on to a farm. But that's all you've got.
So just a little to add to that, I have one. Obviously in the summer people can come by and just like Shep Nachas in my creation that I did in my backyard. But I planted blueberries in my backyard, and I have a whole gate structure and everything. And I did not build a gate yet. I bought the stuff. I wanted to plant it right away, but I didn't build a gate structure. I went out the next morning. Every single leaf from my blueberry thing was done, was gone, completely gone. I went straight to Reno, bought the hardware, and built a fence like literally right before Shabbos that Friday afternoon. Shabbos was late in the summer, which is amazing. But yeah, so I learned the hard way that year, and I built a structure. And this year, I'm actually redoing my structure just to prevent squirrels from getting in and doing exactly what Oshri said. They would literally take a bite out of the tomato and leave it rest on the ground. They did that with my eggplants that I had last year. If anybody likes paper cherry tomatoes, you know those paper cherry tomatoes. I have seeds. I've never been successful with that. I just buy the plants from a nursery out in Saint Laurent. The kids love it. They're fun to pick. They grow all season long. But the squirrels also like it, and they devoured it. So I barely got any of that. But obviously, Oshri, myself, and the rabbi is also a pro now, and Adrianne. We're all pros. I consider myself more of a rustic gardener. If you look at my backyard, it's very rustic-y looking.
More of a decorative gardener.
But obviously the Facebook group is active. I try to post videos and pictures, and everyone posts videos and pictures throughout the summer. I try keeping it up, posting my Venus flytrap that I had eat my spiders. But I killed 2 Venus flytraps, so I'm not gonna start again. But we're always here to answer questions. We're always here to help. And literally Friday afternoons, Friday nights, Shabbos days, I literally just go through seed catalogs, looking at cool seeds that I want to try out. I don't end up doing half of them, but it's a fun. I'm happy everyone came. We will make sure that our trees are planted in Israel. If anybody has any questions, by all means, you can contact myself or Oshri or just message the Facebook group, and one of us or someone will respond. There are a lot of people that are part of this group, not just in Montreal, but also in North tri-state area, Detroit. I think we have a couple of people, Chicago, who also know their climate's different than ours. I was talking to someone last night that lives in West Virginia, and his climate's obviously a lot different than ours. Florida, obviously completely different. But we're all here to help. We're all here to enjoy this, have fun. Once again, contact me if you want a tomato plant. I have no problem giving anybody tomato plants. For the beans and peas, yeah, so you only need, so I gave a bunch. I have more if you want to plant more in your backyard. And if you want to try different kinds, I have lots of different varieties in my house. You only need to start with 2 or 3 beans. I don't know if the document showed the successful rate. Oh no, just the package. It says a lot of the packages says 95% success rate with the seeds. I don't know how. I mean that's why you plant 3 tomatoes, because not all 3 will work. It just so happens that all 3 worked for this one. So obviously the success rate is pretty high on the tomatoes. Beans and peas, you might have 1 or 2 that don't, but you have 1 that will. Save the rest of the beans and peas. Plant them directly into the ground in your backyard. If you have like a backyard area, plant them straight into the backyard. The ones that you're planting now, get bigger pots, put them on your porch so they're easily accessible. So you can go outside your front door in the morning, have a coffee with a snap pea. Yes, exactly. So you poke a little hole with up to your first knuckle, and you put the bean in, and then you just fill it in. This is recorded, so if anybody wants to go back to it, I guess we'll post it somewhere. I'll send out a link once it's.
We're gonna rerun it on PBS Sunday morning next week.
Perfect.
So before everybody lets go, I just have 3 more slides about the particular plants that we have that I want to share with you. It's going to take tops another maybe 5 minutes if everyone still has time. Yeah. All right. Perfect. So let me just finish that really quickly, and then I'll let you off for your weekend. Okay. So kale is a very, very, very hardy plant, incredibly hardy. It'll go to about 1.5 to 2 feet, right? Its stem will be so strong that you will need a saw to cut it. Scissors won't even work. You'll have to have really serious plant clippers for plant, because it will become a very, very woody fiber. But what you do is with kale is as you have little leaves, so as you have top leaves that will absorb sunlight and grow upwards, the leaves under it can be harvested. So you cut the leaves under it and you leave 2 or 3 leaves at the top. And then it'll keep growing again. And in 2 weeks, you'll have even more and even more and even more. Now, if you don't have people in your family that like kale and you're looking for a great kale recipe, I've got one. Cut the leaves, chop them, put a ton of olive oil. Don't skimp on the olive oil. Lemon juice from a lemon, salt and pepper, and mix it. And then take with your hands, crush the leaves, break the fibers down. This will stay in your fridge for 5 to 7 days. Fantastic. The longer you let it wait, the tastier it is because it'll get softer and softer. And the thing is with fresh kale is that when you cut it, you can eat the stem. Normally kale that you buy from the grocery store, you can't eat the stem because it's too bitter, right? Because it's way too mature. It's really big. But if you have the small leaves, you can eat the entire stem, which is fantastic because you have that much more fiber in your diet. Okay. When harvesting beans, what happens with beans? So beans and peas produce fruit really, really fast, right? As soon as you see flowers, you know you're going to have fruit, right? So beans come out of the actual flower itself, and it'll keep growing and growing up to a maximum. In order to have enough to feed your family, for example, let's say you wanted to have a homestead, you would need about 30 bean or pea plants per person in your family. 30. That's a lot, right? And the reason why I'm expressing this information to you is required to produce food for us to eat. It's not just one plant, 30 per person. Imagine that for a second, right? That is a tremendous, tremendous amount. Now, snap peas or peas in general, if you harvest them young, as soon as you see them, you can harvest them for peas specifically and eat them. They're sweet like sugar. If you let them go longer, the peas inside will grow bigger, and the encasing of the fruit will get thicker, and you won't be able to eat that. You'll have to open it up and eat it. I never had peas. I barely tasted my peas because my kids basically saw it, took it, opened it, and ate it like a snack. Okay, so fantastic. But yes, you will need to plant a lot if you want a lot of fruit. Okay, for tomatoes, very, very important. Okay, you've got 2 different kinds of tomatoes. So, for example, Roma tomatoes is known as a determinate plant. Okay, or determinate plant. Sorry, not a determinate. Determinate plant. A determinate plant means all the fruit grows at the same time, matures at the same time, but there's only one fruiting period for that plant, then the plant dies. You harvest everything and you're good, right? So that means if you plant Roma tomatoes, you're gonna get tomatoes if the animals don't get to it, sometime in September. That's when you're gonna get it. Cherry tomatoes, which I believe originated from Israel, but cherry tomatoes are indeterminate, meaning the fruit itself will mature at different rates. So you'll have red tomatoes come out whenever, and then suddenly more tomatoes will grow. And indeterminate tomato plants will never die until winter. If you're in the summer forever, if you're in California, that plant can grow to hundreds of feet. absolutely massive, massive plants, and will keep on producing as long as there's space for roots, as long as there's nutrients in the soil, they'll keep producing. But when do you harvest a tomato? Indeterminate specifically, right? Indeterminate, you harvest it when it's just starting to turn. You don't wait for it to be red. And the reason why is because indeterminate tomatoes have a very special property. They no longer need the plant in order to become sweet. The chemical reaction that makes tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, sweet is already in the fruit itself. So as soon as it starts to turn, you pick it. The reason why is it won't be taking any energy from the plant. So if you pick it and you let it mature in the house, it will still become incredibly sweet, depending on your cultivar, depending on the nutrient content of your soil. Not all tomatoes will be sweet if your soil is just not healthy, or maybe that tomato variant is not that sweet. You have to look up. There's literally thousands and thousands of varieties of tomatoes. So that's when you pick them. As soon as you see a little bit, you pick them, you put it. If they're not maturing fast enough, put a bunch of bananas on top. Bananas excrete this hormone from their leaves that other plants key into to tell them, hey, it's time to mature. It's time to be eaten by animals. Remember, plants want to be eaten by animals. That's why they taste good. Because if they're eaten, the animal will go somewhere else, do its business, and then it will, and its genes will spread further out in nature. Okay, but looking at this chart here, you see how much time it takes for a plant to grow. Just early growth is 25 to 30 days. Vegetative, another 20 to 25 days. Flowering, another 20 to 30 days. At this point, we're already almost the end of summer, right? This is why we start the plant early growth to vegetative indoors. We have to save those 2 months, even almost up to flowering, close to that, right? When I was growing tomatoes, I was starting in early February indoors, right? With a grow light and everything. And if people are interested in grow lights, I can give you recommendations for very cheap grow lights that can help you start your seeds indoors. Okay. And well, how to avoid, we already spoke about that. And really what I want everyone to get out of this is not only the act of planting, but it's the fact that planting is work. Nature will only do 51% of the effort for you. And taking care of plants is akin to energy management. You snip off leaves or stems that are not getting any sun. You snip them off, because why maintain stems that are not getting sun for no reason? That means that's energy that's going to a stem to keep it alive for no reason, right? Plant isn't that smart. It's just going to try to keep itself alive as much as possible. So you snip it. You remove certain flowers at the beginning because you want it at the end. And this is something that you end up learning, and you can go down the rabbit hole of the internet like it's nobody's business, right? And of course, you can ask on the famous Facebook group. Typically, we answer all. Never a novice question. Ask. Go ahead. And if you're in Montreal, we can even come in and say hi and take a look at your stuff, right? And there's one course that I highly recommend you guys take. Coursera is an online university, not an online university, but an online learning platform. It's free, okay? I gave you the link here. It's called Plant Knows. It's a 2-semester class from Tel Aviv University. And it talks about what a plant actually feels. And that is very, very interesting, because it's given in a very simple manner, right? But you're going deep into the science of how a plant grows, what it feels. Does a plant like music, right? People have told me this. Hey, can I play music for my plant? No, you can't. It doesn't care about music. It doesn't care about your styles. Not at all. Not classical, not hard rock. It doesn't care. Darwin confirmed that one. That's where I got this information from, this particular course. So 2 semesters, it's free, or you can donate some money for it if you want. Fantastic stuff. And that's it. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Oshri. Obviously, and people, oh, you can probably hear my wife in the background. If anybody has any questions, for sure, reach out to any of us on Facebook. And on that note, thank you all for coming, and let's plant more trees in Israel next year. And then we'll keep this going. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm eating popcorn.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Yair. Thank you, Oshri. What a wonderful idea. Yeah, I got my hands dirty, and looking forward to some fruits and vegetables.
Amen. Amen.
But you really should like send.
Thank you, guys.
For this summer and like.
Can I ask you one last question? I'm
Thank you.
sorry.